We should start the next session, Business of Cricket. I'm Chris Thornham. I'm going to be moderating. I'm a cricket fan, but I'm not a businessman, and perhaps the best person to open up the discussion is Neil, to explain a little bit how he, through business, became involved in cricket.
Yeah, back in 2003, the company I worked for, which was I was chief executive of Express Dairies, we were trying to buy a dairy business in Leicester, and we were enticed into sponsoring Leicester as a carrot to buy this business because the president owned it. So that's how we got involved in cricket, and how I got involved in cricket. It was my passion, but mainly at recreational level. I never played it at professional level. They changed their constitution, moving away from being a members club to a limited liability company. I was persuaded to stand for the board, never expected to get elected. I got the most number of votes, and within a month found myself as chairman. Stayed there for 7 years, got very much embroiled in cricket, had a good row involving Matthew Hoggard and others, and resigned in 2010. But out of all my involvement, I got involved with the likes of Jonathan Agnew and Christopher Martin Jenkins in establishing a website. My financial partner in the cricket adventure is Lord Jonathan Marland. He got a phone call from Sky saying, "We own the Cricketer magazine, do you want to buy it?" So we bought it 4 years ago. We bought other little cricket assets. So that's my involvement in cricket.
Can I just ask, Neil, does the Cricketer cover all aspects international cricket across?
The magazine, it's a magazine that, we bought it mainly for the brand, but the magazine's been around since 1921. It was started by Sir Pelham Warner, who was the England captain at the time and famously managed the England team in Australia for the Bodyline series in 1933. Look, if you want me to bore you about cricket, I can talk like this forever. Okay, so it was really the brand we were interested in, and we bought other things as we've gone along. We bought a business called Cricket Archive, which is the most accurate cricket database in the world, covers all first-class matches ever, and we're starting to develop product out of that, which we're trying to sell to the professional game. Analysis of particularly 2020 cricket at the minute, that England for the World Cup actually chose a bowler who can't bowl to left-handed batsmen, that he gets smacked all over the park.
Who's this?
I'll get back to you. But he goes for 15 and over in the first 3 overs when he opens the bowling against left-handers. He goes for 6 when he goes bowls against right-handers. The England selectors didn't actually know that. He played 1 game and they dropped him. So that's the sort of product that we're actually developing out of the database. But we've got a lot of ideas, and we're actually moving into a bit into the conference market and the entertainment market. We had an evening with Geoffrey Boycott only 2 or 3 weeks ago, which a question time with Geoffrey Boycott, which proved quite interesting and illuminating. He is a very good performer, actually.
Did anyone else get a word in edgeways?
Well, the story there is that Simon Hughes is our editor, and Simon decided we'd do this panel. So he went to Geoffrey and he said, "Geoffrey, we're having a panel the night before the Lord's Test. No, lad, you don't need a panel, you only need me." And that was it. That was it. Geoffrey did it for not a lot of money. He came along, entertained for an hour and a half, answered every question, signed every autograph, and then went. Answer your question.
Great. We've also got our resident panellist, James Crabtree. So just before we get going with some questions, James, your involvement reporting on cricket.
Yeah, so I feel a bit embarrassed about this. I was meant to be on this panel. The last one I wasn't meant to be on, but I was invited at the last minute. I feel like I should have my sleeping bag up here. When I was Mumbai bureau chief, I'm a big cricket fan. I can't play, but I've always loved watching the game. And so, in amongst all of the other very tedious things that I got to report on in corporate India, third quarter results stories for IT outsourcers and that sort of thing, every year there was this wonderful sort of gift that I was given, which is the ability to write about the IPL. And the FT doesn't really do sport very well, doesn't care very much about sport, but it does the business of sport. And so the IPL was a kind of fantastic FT sports story because it was serious money of a sort that has never been seen in cricket before. And it was also fantastically corrupt in the manner of so many other things in India. And this was brought together in the 2013 series of the IPL. Now, I'm going to guess everybody here knows about the IPL, but just in case you don't, it's an annual tournament that runs for about 2 months from kind of early April to it's like 25th of May, so it runs for about 7 or 8 weeks. It's normally held in India, as long as there's not some crisis, which means it's held in Dubai or South Africa or somewhere else like that. It has normally 8 teams, although sometimes 7, sometimes more, depending on how many of them have got banned that year. And it's fantastic. And I used to live in Mumbai, and I'd go to watch the Mumbai Indians games, which were not that far away from where I used to live. It's got, it really makes old-style cricket of the sort that my grandfather used to love, and we all claim to love old-style Test cricket. It's really difficult to go back and watch old-style Test cricket after you've watched IPL because it's so much more fun and exciting. But in that 2013 series, they had a huge corruption scandal over something called spot fixing, which is a kind of match fixing. The details of which I can try and dredge up from my memory if you're interested. But the end result of that was that a few players, including one who is an Indian international, were hauled up on corruption charges. There were lots of bookies and associates and family members of the guy who used to and possibly still does run Indian cricket, a kind of cricket tycoon called N. Srinivasan. And the story of the IPL for the last couple of years has been a kind of faltering attempt to investigate this scandal and associated kind of littoral scandals to it, and a half-hearted attempt by the governing authorities of Indian cricket to kind of clean the whole mess up. And in a funny way, cricket is, I just think, a fascinating analogy for India in 2 sort of different respects, I suppose. The first being that cricket is a great example of what's happening to India as a whole, namely you take a kind of old-fashioned system and then you pump an enormous amount of money into it and then you see what happens, and some of that is fantastic. The kind of the IPL is this amazing spectacle which in many ways has revolutionized cricket and saved it from total irrelevancy for the coming generation, given I think it's pretty clear that the idea that my son would want to watch the type of cricket that Geoffrey Boycott liked, sort of a wet day in Yorkshire where you end the day 198 for 3 with nothing having happened. I mean, this would have been a total disaster for the game. But on the downside, the extraordinary financial firepower that the IPL has brought in has come along with some fairly unsavory practices, which have, to many people's eyes, not just sort of tarnished the governance of cricket in India, but also globally, because now India is the unquestioned global superpower of cricket. And in a funny way, the second way in which cricket is kind of analogous for what's going on in India is that cricket is really the only area where India is the unchallenged global superpower. But obviously there are many, many other areas over the next 2, 3, 4 decades in which India is going to become the world's leading nation in particular industries or areas of practice. And so you see in cricket a kind of an example, in some ways very good and in some ways not so good, of the way a kind of Indian global leadership might develop. And I don't know if you probably know more about, for instance, the way that Indian leadership of world cricket, the effect that it's had on the governance of global cricket and the kind of power dynamics within the ICC. That's one thing that has sort of come out of this. But anyway, I just thought this was a glorious story to cover as a journalist. And I'm no longer in Mumbai. It's one of the stories I'm most sad not to still be covering, because it was kind of the story that kept on giving.
So the topic is business of cricket, and before we take our first question, we'll take one. You touched on T20. In terms of world rankings, we have Test, One Day International, and T20 that you can categorise teams in.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I think India leads England in everything, whether it's Test, One Day, or T20 at the moment on the ICC rankings, but it's second or third in all of those categories, whereas England is a little bit lower. But the interesting thing is that India is playing more T20s and more one-day internationals and less test matches than England. England is the sort of the flip side of that, but England is maybe changing a little bit. A sort of
People in India don't give a toss about Test cricket. I mean, it's one of the most remarkable things that, and in that sense, they are the harbinger of the future. I mean, sad to say, most people in this country, cricket fan or not, sort of cleave to this principle stand that Test cricket is the fundamental form of the game, and that really you've got to love Test cricket. That's what it's all about. The rest of it's kind of trying to keep Test cricket. And I sort of in my water also believe that, because I was brought up with it, and every time you listen to Test Match Special, you listen to kind of Aggers crapping on about like the spirit of the game, and so you really believe in this stuff. But in India, they don't care. You know, no one cares about Test cricket. There was a nice joke going around on Twitter when Dhoni resigned the captaincy of the Test cricket match, and someone on Twitter said, Dhoni's now going to hand over the ability to the next generation to show that they have a complete disregard for Test cricket as captain, because Dhoni wasn't interested in playing Test cricket, and none of the rest of them are really either, although when backs against the wall they'll say that. But yeah, the Indian cricket-loving public will not go and watch Test cricket and loves, the shorter forms of the game. And so it doesn't surprise me remotely that India plays a lot more of that type of the game. And if you're a great lover of Test cricket, then for a while at least, Test cricket will become a bastion that is played by, in South Africa and Australia. But I sort of fear eventually that this will just sort of, become a kind of slight oddity in a game that is dominated by the shorter forms. So.
You can't tell this is James' passion, can you? Gosh, how do you respond to that? I mean, if we look at the economics of the game, then 80% of the cricket economy is in India. That is the reality of it. And what we forget is that actually it was only 20 years ago, or just over 20 years ago, that the MCC actually ran the game. And the metaphor, it's not cricket, was there for any unfair practice. I mean, and there is still that underlying tension to it. But cricket is a business these days, and the economics of the game vary country by country. So if you actually take our country, Britain, then it's a top-down game. The revenue streams that fund the whole game come from international cricket. They don't actually come from the attendances, they come from the television rights. The television rights are everything in sport. That if you haven't got television, if you haven't got the rights over television, you haven't got a business. And that's certainly true of our game. And it's different in football, of course, where you've got the Premier League, it's the clubs who've got the whip hand. That's why we've got such a poor England side at the moment, because the fortunes of the England football team are irrelevant to the Premier League clubs. That's just window dressing. They're in business. The more games they can play, the better, because they get more revenue in, both TV revenue and attendances. I mean, the cost of going to a Premier League game is enormous. But cricket, it is a top-down game. We play a 4-day game because we need to develop a test team. At the moment, it is test cricket in this country which pays the bills. The most beneficial series financially in this country is a series against India, because it's selling the TV rights to India. It outguns an Australian series. We've now got 2 years where revenues will be lower because we're not playing one of the big two. So there is this financial tension. And I mean, this is all about India, but if you take India in the IPL, the original, I mean, it's fascinating the way that IPL was or T20 cricket was actually embraced in India. There was no interest in it when England started. I mean, it came here in 2002, I think, was the first series. It was there to try and put a little bit of money into the county cricket clubs' pockets with a bit of fun on a summer's evening. That was the principle behind it. And then the international teams got involved in it, and we had the first T20 World Cup down in South Africa. India weren't interested. They sent a second team with Dhoni. They won it. And from that moment onwards, whoosh, India's interest in T20 cricket and the birth of the IPL. There was an attempt, an ICL was formed by help me out here, ex-Indian fast bowler, but he got seen off by the BCCI and particularly Lalit Modi, and the IPL was born. The whole thing was funded on a TV deal with Sony. Fascinatingly, despite all its problems, and it has had corruption issues, and two sides are currently suspended from the IPL for 2 years, the Chennai Super Kings and the Rajasthan Royals, and 2 temporary franchises have been created to take their place. Sony are now, the first TV deal, which has funded the whole thing, came to an end at this, or it may not have come to an end, but it has to be renegotiated within 60 days of the end of the last IPL series. And it is, the TV rights are expected to go for between 2 and 3 times what they went for originally. As a money spinning machine, it is fantastic. And these assets, they do go for enormous sums of money, because the position of cricket in Indian society is very different to here. It's film stars, cricketers, politicians, maybe not. But the position in society, these are vanity assets. It's a show of wealth. You know, if you're an owner of an IPL, it's a show of wealth. And that's the position of it. And we talk about self-interest in cricket. Cricket's awash with self-interest at every level. So the old adage of it ain't not cricket, it's not been cricket for at least 25 years since the MCC got pulled out of it.
So there was a question from the floor. Maybe we could take that.
Yeah, I think you've probably asked my original question, which was going to be, does Test cricket have a right to exist? But I think what I'll do is I'll turn that on my head slightly and I guess putting my Jonathan Aguirre's hat on. Cricket is not just about India. There are, 8, 9 Test playing countries, and what's good for one is not necessarily good for another. I think there's a rather, I'm not quite sure what the word is, maybe nasty is the wrong word, but the trait that world cricket's gone, that basically 3 countries, India, Australia and England, have carved it up. Isn't that really just leading to the long-term detriment of the game? And at the end of the day, no matter how good you are, if you've got no one to play, you haven't got a game.
Well, you're absolutely right. There's no argument. And each of those 3 individuals, and it was all about 3 individuals, have got their own agendas. Our man, he got two issues. One, he wanted to become president of the ICC, and also there is so much debt in the national game here at the moment that he wanted to put more money into coffers. The building programme that has gone on in this country over the last 20 years in building stadia to host international matches has been complete lunacy. Most of it funded, or a lot of it funded by local authorities, all on the basis that if we can attract international cricket here, this is the benefit to the economy. So put your hands in your pockets, Mr. Cardiff City Council, and we'll get international cricket here. So then you get the reaction of the established grounds who go along to their local authority and say, if we lose international cricket, this will be the effect on the local economy. So you better put your hand in your pocket. Result, we've got 11, 12 international match grounds. MCC laws are guaranteed 2 a year. The first 2 in the season aren't worth having. They're financial disasters. You've got 10 or 11 grounds actually fighting over 4 Test matches. The Oval are guaranteed a Test, Yorkshire are guaranteed a Test, so it's actually even worse than that, the scrummage that goes on. And the counties are bust. Birmingham City Council have lent Warwickshire 30 million, I think it is. They can't even pay the interest on the debt. That debt will get written off at some stage. I could rant forever on this. East Leigh Borough Council bought the Rose Bowl for 40 odd million because it was going bust.
I think it's an interesting one to kind of reflect on, because this is the point I was trying to make about kind of welcome to the post-Western world, that England and Australia and South Africa have run global cricket forever, and now India runs global cricket, and suddenly you discover all the English and Australian voices saying, well, this is very unfair. We must have a rules-based system which listens to everyone, and it must not be run in the interest of the Indians, despite the fact it's been run in the interest of the English and the Australians for a century. So I think the Indians would look at this and say, screw you, it's now our turn. And so, that sort of that's life to a degree. But I think the point that you were making about the interesting thing about the IPL and its enormous financial firepower is how little all of the corruption scandals in the end have mattered. That you would, it sort of became a kind of cliche that you write about this tournament as the scandal-prone or corruption-ridden tournament. But it remains within India one of the very few mass sort of spectator properties that if you are a commercial brand, how do you reach 100, 200 million Indians? I mean, it's a cliche. People talk about ABCD, astrology, Bollywood, cricket, and devotional, which are the 4 ways in which you can kind of reach a mass audience. And the IPL is overwhelmingly the biggest and most successful of them. So I didn't know the point you made about the rebidding and the Sony contract, but that Sony contract went for $1.6 billion nearly 10 years ago. So it doesn't surprise me that it's now worth some multiple of that. But despite everything, despite some not great governance standards and a kind of rolling series of scandals and management feuds and all the rest of it, this tournament remains just a huge success for good or ill, depending on your view of the kind of future of the game. So.
If I can just interrupt on one point there, the one thing they understood very clearly, the IPL, when they kicked off, is that this is a television product.
Yeah.
You've got to have full grounds. Even if you give the tickets away, it doesn't matter. You need to have full grounds to make it a TV spectacle. And then you look at our donkeys that are running the game here at the minute. Sky Sports needs something to fill the schedules between the end of the football season and the start of the new season, and particularly if they haven't got the Euros. Thank God they didn't. Anyway, that's beside the point. And you look at floodlit games, 50 over floodlit games with about 3 men and a dog watching the game. It just fills their schedule, but it doesn't create a buzz. It doesn't create an atmosphere. And the one thing about the IPL, which mirrors the NFL in the States, the land of free enterprise and all the rest of it, from 1935 onwards, the NFL has had the principle that what sells sport is unpredictability. You don't want a situation where you can predict which of the teams is actually going to win every year. That's why the Leicester phenomenon this year has been so popular, because it was unexpected, but it's that unexpected element in sport which sells sports. And the IPL established a principle back in 1935 that on any given Sunday, as it was then, on any given Sunday, any team can beat any team. And they put 2 mechanisms in place, or 3 mechanisms in place to achieve it. One was an overall salary cap. So there's not on an individual, but there is a limit to how much you can actually spend on your team. There's all sorts of pluses and minuses, but anyway, that's one of the guiding principles. So nobody's got a financial advantage. And then secondly, whoever comes bottom in the NFL has first pick next year. The average life of an NFL footballer is 4 years. The college system is feeding that all the time. So whoever comes bottom gets first pick next year. So the whole idea is to even it up. And then the other thing they did was they realised that it was better to be cooperative and marketing the whole thing together rather than fighting each other. And there's a lot of lessons there. But the IPL's been done on the same basis, that it works on the basis of unpredictability sells the game. So there are checks and balances within the IPL system which allow for that unpredictability.
There was a question from the front here. So.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the panel, how much of a trickle-down effect is there from that huge IPL revenue into the structure of Indian and global cricket?
I honestly don't know. I suspect it's zilch, actually, because these teams have got to be paid for, and I guess that the IPL teams would actually say, because there's an element of having to play local young players, so there is an element there of bringing youngsters into the game. trickle down financially, I don't think there's much at all. Actually.
I think I presume that there's a sort of minimum amount of development funding, but I don't think, I mean, the kind of state level structure of Indian cricket is just a whole nother can of worms when you start getting into the individual cricket associations. And I presume that there is some way, so this is a big money, all the money goes to the BCCI, the governing body of Indian cricket, or rather that money which is not given to the teams themselves, most of which are loss making. And so the BCCI then divvies up money and hands it down. And so some of that must go into kind of improved facilities. I don't believe with all of that money sloshing around that there hasn't been any improvement in grassroots cricket, but I suspect the extent of it is far less than you would imagine given the amount of money and given the way in which money moves around the Indian cricket system, which with the best will in the world is heavily based on kind of patronage and the sort of the kind of way in which the state level cricket associations are controlled. What the relationship is between the IPL and global cricket, I suspect that's zero, but I don't know about that for a fact.
It's through the...
Except in a kind of indirect, except in an indirect sense that by having this monstrous league with its Indian star system, that makes global cricket more popular as, you know, so when India tour with these same players who are part of the Indian monster system, that benefits England or Sri Lanka because Indians want to see them play wherever they're playing. So there's that sort of byproduct effect, but in a direct financial transfer sense globally, I think the answer is zero, but I might be wrong.
I'll take your point about wanting to see stars in test teams, but the other problem that's coming down the track now is that when India turn up for a test series here, after one test, they're knackered. Seriously, they are knackered. They cannot play beyond the first test. You look at the last series, they were competitive in one game and then they'd had it. Their opening fast bowler, who looked really sharp and interesting, did his back or something first game and that was it. End of story, no attack. So Test cricket is in a difficult position. I was fortunate enough to sit next to Andrew Strauss at Trent Bridge last week, and they're desperate to maintain Test cricket because it's so important to England and Australia as a revenue earner. And there is the experiment of day-night tests with a pink ball. I think I put it to him, does that not devalue the game at all, this history of the game? But his reply was, we've got to do something. So it is a difficulty. One fascinating fact, which I'm being a bit indiscreet here, but I was summoned to the court of Lalit Modi a couple of years ago.
Sounds interesting.
when he was holed up in difficult circumstances in Sloane Square. Not exactly in the deprived circumstances, but what he pointed out to me, which I didn't realise, and I don't think many people realise, that hardly any of these cricket authorities have actually got any authority given to them by their governments. The ECB hasn't, which the BCCI hasn't, as far as I know. I think he said there was only 2 governing bodies that have actually got any sort of government authority. So whether there'll be a revolution at some stage, the ECB is a limited company, it's ECB Limited. That's how it is, and it's virtually self-appointed, but it's got the TV rights, it's got rights over this, that, and the other, and therefore it's very difficult for somebody to muscle in. But in this parlour state that cricket's in, where the land grabbing or money grab from the big 3, where does West Indian cricket feature after that? How do you develop in other parts of the world? All those sort of aspects are difficult by that sort of grab. So I've lost my train here. Wait a minute, where was I heading there? Talking about trains.
The governance of Indian cricket is kind of completely fascinating. I mean, I sort of studied it off and on for 5 years and sort of still felt like I'd only got to the very foothills of this system. Each state level, so you were asking about kind of the states, particularly the big cricket playing states, sort of Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, the big states, they tend to have particular kind of power structures and power players, some of them linked to big companies that have been invested in it, some of them linked to big politicians. You'll find whenever there's a crisis in Indian cricket, there's some very unusual people right at the top of Indian politics get involved. So Arun Jaitley, the current finance minister, is a big cricket power broker. There are various other people. Amit Shah, who's Modi's kind of Frank Underwood figure, the kind of right-hand man, is very involved in different bits of cricket. And I've often wondered why the politicians want to get involved in all of this, because it's a kind of huge can of worms. But in the end, on a very uncharitable level, it's because it's so lucrative and there's opportunities for backhanders. But I suspect that's a bit cynical, and it's simply more that in a country that is so sort of joyously obsessed with this sport, that it's kind of something that everyone is fascinated with and everyone wants to be involved with somehow. And so the governance of the game at the national level, but even at the state level, is something that all sorts of people get involved in, from the big tycoons who run the conglomerates who have the money, to the local political power brokers, to the kind of cricket luminaries, to there was just, I don't know, did you follow this thing about Anil Kumble, the spin bowler, got appointed as the coach? Is that right? I can't remember. There was some kind of mini furore that just happened because they tried to run a sort of straight contest to appoint someone to an important position, and in the end it all got messed around with, and there were all sorts of interests at play, and it was all highly political. And I suppose that probably happens in any governing association, be it kind of table tennis or tiddlywinks, but when it's India and when it's cricket and when there's all this money at stake, the stakes are that much higher.
There's a question from the back there.
Hi, it wasn't Simon Reed. I spoke earlier about having an exclusive license for the MCC and Lords, and in fact Father Time brands for India. So I've been on a 5 or 6 year journey learning about how we create MCC Lords branded residential communities around which would be built around a beautiful landscaped cricket ground. Important to say, not a stadium, just a ground. Because
this is in India?
In India.
Fascinating.
And we got the license in 2011, and here we are in 2016. We've signed one deal. I've been the length in Pune. I've been the length and breadth of India, talking to every developer of repute or otherwise. It's been the most extraordinary challenge, and to endorse effectively, James, what you were saying, and I remember meeting you in Mumbai just after you arrived, to endorse what you said. It's all about money. It's 100% about money, and that's why the politicians get involved. It's as simple as that. The trickle-down effect, in my inquiries and discussions with certain of the state organisations, I would say on average they probably see no more than 20 to 30 crores per annum, which is about £2 to £3 million. In the context of the money that's coming into the game, predominantly through the IPL, it's de minimis. The BCCI keep most of it. What they do with it is anyone's guess. But there is the linkage between politics and cricket and the BCCI. And it's always been fascinating to me that an organisation that is as powerful as the BCCI is not owned, if that's the right word, or indeed controlled by the government itself. It's utterly autonomous. It's a fascinating area. One day I'll write a book. I don't know what the title will be, but anyway, that wasn't really a question. It was just
a question. Why the MCC putting money into India? I mean, I applaud the efforts in Afghanistan, but and places of Mongolia even.
Well, the genesis of it was, and I used to be involved in, as a property person, I was involved in a committee, and this was going back to 2009 and 10, which economically around the world was an incredibly challenging time. And even if you're the venue of Lords, you in that time were struggling to sell £100 tickets. So there was a financial crunch at the MCC, which needed addressing. And also, there was a theme going around the MCC executive and the committees. How do we, the MCC, remain relevant in 21st century cricket? And at that time, I was going back and forwards to India every month of my life, as I have been for about 12 years now. And I said to the chairman and chief executive, if you want to remain relevant in 21st century cricket, you've got to understand that it's now headquartered in India, and if you want to get with the programme and diversify your brand, build your brand, and possibly even generate and diversify revenues away from major match day income, at Lords, that's the country you should be looking at. So they kind of said, okay, well, off you go and work up a proposal. So that was the genesis of it, and so the initiatives in Afghanistan have been predominantly driven by expanding the game and charity purposes, and that's, if we ever do manage to get a development up and running, we will be running scholarship programs within the academy. But it is a commercial venture, and the MCC would generate commercial license royalties from it. But it will be a platform to build the brand in India and, alongside commercial opportunities, do good by bringing scholarship programs under the MCC banner to local underprivileged schools and so on.
Good. Question for the audience: who do you think is the most popular English-British commentator in India? It is Boycott, which I just find incredible. But
Okay, I've got a question. I'm going to put it to you first, Neil. If you think about the UK English cricket, and you're a business and you want to sponsor and you want to be visible, would you be the same kind of business that's looking to sponsor in the UK as if you were going to India? Would you be looking at the same segments of the market? So, for example, would you be going after services? Would you be Accenture, or would you be Pepsi? Is there a difference in the way in the businesses that would want to advertise in the IPL versus in English cricket?
well, I think you've got local markets and you've got local demographics. So I mean, it's kind of matching. So here, I mean, there's minor sponsorship things. I mean, with the cricketer for over 40 years has run the National Village Cup, which for somebody with the finals every year at Lords, village cricketers actually get the chance to play at Lords. And I mean, MCC are absolutely fantastic. They treat them as if they're international cricketers for the day, and they lay on a dinner in the long room at night. So, I mean, there is specific opportunities there, but on a small level to get to villages and grassroots cricket that way. But I mean, really, the big spends in this country, it's going to be Test cricket, and it's going to be largely Test cricket against the major nations. And over the years, there've been all sorts of different sponsors. I mean, at the moment, Waitrose are the sponsors of the English cricket team. I think they're out fairly shortly. So it's kind of matching demographics. So I don't think you can actually say that it's particular services. Again, in India, the vanity asset thing comes into it, and cement companies are quite heavy, which you wouldn't necessarily see as consumer brands necessarily, would you?
There's a question there from Rakesh.
Perhaps the final question for me. We're in an Olympic year, so here's an Olympic-sized question for you. If you look at the size of the populations in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, South Asia, basically, they're not that well represented in Olympic sports. So has anybody ever tried to get the short form of cricket into the Olympics? And perhaps the short form of cricket in the Olympics would be a good way to make it a more global sport than it already is. Has there ever been any attempt by the Brits, the Australians, the Indians, or anybody to try and do that?
It's sort of ringing a bell somewhere that someone in the ICC, or whatever, IOC once said that this might happen. I think it's sort of pretty unlikely. I know the Indian sport that tends to get mentioned in this regard more often is kabaddi, which some of you may remember from Channel 4 in the sort of mid-90s. And kabaddi at least is played in rather more countries than cricket, although not at a very high level. So around ASEAN and in a number of other countries you'll get kabaddi. I mean, I don't know if this is a live conversation. I know that within the IOC rules now, host nations, of which India, I imagine, will be an Olympic host in the next 2 decades, or probably 2 or 3 decades, but probably not immediately because of the infrastructural challenges, that host nations get to kind of nominate one sport, I think, or something like. There's some rule which will allow you to kind of bring in sports that are particularly popular within your host nation. And so I suspect for cricket, the odds are that the first time India hosts the Olympics, whenever that is, in 20 years' time, that might be when cricket gets in there. I don't know. Do you know the answer? I don't know the answer. So.
I don't know enough about the IOC, to be honest, but I've not really picked it up.
I
think the difficulty is that it's not played seriously in that many countries, is it?
Yeah, no. I mean, if you've only got 8 or 9 test-playing nations and there's many associate nations again, then it doesn't really kind of quite pass the barrier.
Balance other countries, isn't it? Creating an association and then.
Maybe.
If you have rugby sevens and the Olympics as you have,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can get cricket.
Yeah.
I think they tried to get the cricket game into the Asian Games, but India said that we won't get a top team for the Asian Games, so they just stopped the conversation there. So Asian Games would probably be step one for cricket to go into Olympics.
But one of the more interesting things, I mean, maybe we wanted to wrap this up, the more interesting little sort of trendlet that happened recently was this league that Shane Warne and whoever Tendulkar associated himself with to try and take cricket to America for the first times. And this is not a kind of entirely ridiculous idea now. You have 2020 and a kind of passionate South Asian diaspora base on, in and around New York and in and around San Francisco. The notion that you could kind of get a bridgehead for cricket in the US is not kind of completely ridiculous anymore, I don't think, because you have this form of the game that is potentially marketable. I mean, it's a hell of a long hill, a sort of uphill battle, but it's not entirely.
There's a cricket league in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So.
2020, not Test cricket.
Oh yeah, not Test cricket. No, definitely.
Yeah.
It has to be.
I think we probably need to wrap it up there. So if we could maybe thank our panelists.